What's up? I'm John Middlekauff, the host of the 3 and Out podcast, and you can find it below in the description. Also, you're watching this on the Volumes YouTube channel. I need you to subscribe right now, share it with your friends. I wanted to dive into a game that was played in Los Angeles, as Jerry Jones would say, and involved the Raiders against the Chargers. And the Chargers obviously won, got a big win. They have a huge game Thursday, big game, really. I think the Chiefs, I got to give them the nod over the Bills just because they beat the Bills. But as we saw in the playoff game, they're basically equals. And the Chargers, I would put a rung under, but the Chargers have a chance. Justin Herbert looked awesome. But I'm going to start with the Raiders. And when they made the move to this big building, it was a really, really big deal because they had played in. I drive by it sometimes when I go to the airport, and right now attempting to move back and forth between Scottsdale, and you drive by the Coliseum, and it makes you shake your head, and you go, I can't believe that professional sports, and hell, the A's are still in there, but only about 1,500 people ever attend those games, were played in this place. This is a complete dump. They're not in a million years in 2022. Even the smaller cities like Green Bay or Buffalo, whatever, you would never put anything in Oakland. Glad they're in Vegas. Want to attend the new stadium one day, if Mark would let me. Me and Mark got along in person. Clearly, behind the scenes, I don't think he was a big fan of my critical takes. But I've known Derek since he was in high school. When I was a graduate assistant at Fresno State, for a lot of you guys are new listeners, we've grown exponentially. Thank you to you guys, not to me. I appreciate it. I was a graduate assistant in the recruiting office at Fresno State. And when I got the job in 2008, he was already committed there. So he came on his visit as a senior in high school. We watched all of his games in Bakersfield Christian, spent a year with him. Then his true freshman year where he was the backup. I have followed his career extremely closely. For a lot of those games in Oakland, I attended. I think he has really turned himself into a solid NFL player. He was really good the one season for Del Rio, but other than that, I think for many years, he left a lot to be desired. These last couple years, and specifically last year, was very, very impressive. But now they get a real coach in Josh McDaniels. They get rid of the Gruden just disaster. And the situation is just, it was too much bullshit. It was so much about other than football with John. And now it feels like, even though I'm going to give John some credit, he helped Derek get the kind of the train back on the tracks. And now Derek, based on last year, was very impressive. But the thing was not the head coach, because Gruden had a lot of pressure on him because he made $100 million. When you're the starting quarterback and really a player for the Raiders, they haven't really had expectations over the last couple decades. And specifically when Derek's been there, they've only had expectations one time. And that was the year after they made the playoffs with Jack Del Rio. And it was a disaster. Jack obviously got fired. They didn't even come close to making the playoffs. And then Gruden came in. They were terrible for a little while after. So this is the first year that they have tangible pressure on them. They trade for Devontae. They go land Josh McDaniels. Their team on paper is really good. And in the first game against one of the most talented teams in the NFL, I've been saying it over and over, the Chargers might be the best team on paper in the league. Derek's terrible. Derek threw 3 interceptions and just awful picks. 2 of them are just inexcusable. They can't happen. Not in that magnitude. And when you start making huge money and there is literally pressure behind you. Listen, I am critical on Dak. One thing a major difference between Dak and Derek, the pressure on Dak every single year to make the playoffs, and every single game is consumed by 25 to 30 million people, is a completely different ball game than what Derek's used to. Well, this year, 2022, all the microscopes are out. Everyone's following the Raiders. Because we're talking about the Raiders being a playoff team. They're being discussed like they're an equal. Last year, they got to creep up on everybody. Last year, literally, their star wide receiver killed someone. Their coach was fired the next week, and everyone wrote him off. So they got to really fly under the radar and be the hunter. Well, this year, I'm not saying they're the hunted, but people are picking them to be good. There are expectations. It's so easy in life to be the little guy swinging up. Hell, I truly don't give a shit about any of this because I don't have that much to lose. It is so much more difficult being in Coward or Dan Patrick or one of their seats. Everyone is gunning for them. They are on top of the mountain. Where I'm at, and I'm not acting like I'm not doing well, but by no means do I have the pressure in terms of everything I say is under a microscope. Blogs are picking it up, and people, no, that's just not happening. It's easy to be in my position, and I get a lot of credit from, obviously you guys like it because I'm very unfiltered. Well, hopefully that never changes, but let's face it, it has for a lot of people over the years in my seat, and no different with athletes. It's easy to be on the come up. Well, what happens when you get to the top of the mountain? Only so many guys, Tom Brady, Steph Curry, right, Derek Jeter can just handle that spot. Now, obviously, Derek Carr's not anywhere near the top of the mountain, but this is the first year he's got expectations. And he was terrible yesterday. And he made some really nice throws. He's got a very good arm. He can make plays that goes, wow. But overall, that was a game, too, where Herbert was really good. He did not turn the ball over. No picks. Threw 3 touchdowns. The Chargers were up. The Raiders came right back. That was a game that they could have had. The Raiders could have won that game. It's not like the Chargers were up 30 points. They were right in the game. Turnover, turnover, turnover. You can't have second half turnovers if you're going to be a $40 to $45 million quarterback playing other, let's face it, the Chargers are going to be a playoff team. Like that can't happen. And I would imagine today Josh McDaniels isn't that happy. And I know Derek's not either. I watched his post-game press conference, basically took all the blame, but you get to this point at the highest level when you're making the most money, no one gives a shit about what you say. It's just about what you do. And then another guy who's taken a lot of heat, and unlike Derek, hasn't been able to fly under the radar. Because the moment he got to the league, he played for the Eagles, one of the marquee brands and one of the biggest markets in the league. And he's become one of the most polarizing players. And I've said over and over, I was kind of out on him just because literally everyone's always out on him. The Eagles were out on him. The Colts were immediately out on him. And I'm like, listen, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, maybe it's a duck. Maybe there's something off with this guy. Maybe it's not someone else's fault. We all know that guy. It's this guy. It was that guy. It wasn't me. No, eventually, if it constantly things keep happening to you, it's you. And that's where I kind of ended up with Carson Wentz. I've never argued, and no one could, his physical attributes, his size, his athleticism, and his arm. But the turnovers are an issue. And yesterday, I'm not acting like I was watching the Commanders and the Jags, but I was keeping an eye on it. And the moment he threw an interception, everyone went, oh my God, I can't believe what Carson Wentz just did. So I went back this morning and I watched it. And I watched the pick that he threw to the number 1 overall pick from Georgia against the Jags. I think it was a much more incredible player by the defensive lineman than it was a bad throw by Carson Wentz. The dude was literally hiding behind an offensive tackle on a screen play, and then he throws it to his running back or tight end or whoever the screen was supposed to go to, and this guy kind of jettisons out of nowhere and makes a play. But the internet totally shit on him. So I assumed when I saw everyone shitting on him on the internet, like, oh, Wentz sucks. I went back and watched. I thought Carson was pretty good. And then what did he do? He threw a touchdown when the football team or the Commanders were down 22-14. He had a dime down the sideline. And then later in the game, he threw the game-winning touchdown. He threw 4 touchdowns yesterday. Like, that's a pretty good start. Now, I am not one of those believers that the Jags are going to win more than probably 5 games, 6 at the most. So it's not like they're a good team. But when you look at the landscape of the NFC East, and we'll get into the Giants here in a second, like, you know, why couldn't the Commanders, especially with Dak being out and Cooper Rush and just we saw the Cowboys, if Carson Wentz is just a solid player, why couldn't they compete in that division? They can. And if Carson Wentz is going to play like that and throw 4 touchdowns, listen, you're going to throw picks. Unless like Aaron Rodgers, you know, who last year had like 4 or 5 picks or whatever, some of the small percentage of quarterbacks that throw no picks. I can live with picks if you throw 45 touchdowns. Now, Stafford is like right on the line of a guy that throws a lot of touchdowns and a lot of picks. I don't want 15 picks, but I can live with 9 to 11 if you are producing points. That's literally the point of the game, is to score points. And when you throw touchdowns, you put points on the board. And when you push the ball down the field, you give the team a chance to have an explosive offense. I thought Carson Wentz was pretty impressive yesterday down the stretch, which is what quarterbacks get paid for. So I would imagine today Ron Rivera in Washington's pretty happy with their quarterback. And speaking of a talent that had kind of fallen on rough times, and sometimes in football, you know, it's out of your control in the sense of you get hurt. You know, you can be an excellent player, an elite player, tear an ACL, tear a shoulder, shatter a leg, and it derail your career, right? Most of us, if we are elite at our job, it would take me doing something stupid to derail my career, right? Committing some crime and going to jail, right? Getting a DUI, a car accident, hurting myself. It would be my fault. If something happens to me that's out of my control, right? I get sick, something happens to a family member that I have to take some time off, like no one would say anything. People would understand. But that's the thing in football. You get injured a lot of the times. Like, it wasn't Saquon Barkley's fault that he tore his ACL. No player in a million, like Dak didn't want to break his hands. TJ Watt didn't want to tear his pec. None of these guys are trying to get hurt. And in football, more than most sports, it happens all the time just because of the nature of the game. So Saquon had an ankle injury in 19. He had an ACL in 20. And I think sometimes, and I'm as guilty as anyone, I struggle with patience. And I struggle with patience in my everyday life. I struggle with patience as a follower of sports. I struggle with patience. It's a huge, red flag on the way I operate in life. It's something I work on constantly, is to slow down. I struggle on patience on the golf course. Take a deep breath, John. Just relax. It's just naturally in my personality. Now, the amount of caffeine I take on a daily basis probably does not help. But I'll promise you one thing. Caffeine is not slowing down. So the Saquon Barkley I saw the last couple of years, he just looked pretty terrible. And then when I watched him against the Titans, because I had to after seeing the hype, I went, that's the guy. I love Saquon Barkley at Penn State. I loved him as a rookie. Running back is one of my favorite positions in all of sports because it encompasses everything. You got to run the ball inside. You got to run the ball outside. You have to catch the ball. You have to know every element of the offense because you got to know what the offensive line's doing and the quarterback's doing. And you also got to pass block. Now, Saquon doesn't pass block, but if you are going to be that great and that explosive, I can somewhat give you a pass. And watching Saquon Barkley against the Tennessee Titans bust off big run and big run. Now, he had one that was like a 60, 70-yard run. He had another one that was probably like 30 yards, which those are awesome, and those are fun. In the long run, he hit a corner, and he beat a DB with speed. That was stuff he was doing early on in his career. That was a big reason. Listen, we can call Dave Gettleman the village idiot, and let's face it, he was pretty god-awful at his job. I mean, he was terrible. Deserved to be fired years before he was. But he wasn't wrong at the talent in which Saquon Barkley was. He was wrong in where you draft a running back. Like, you don't take a guy number 2. I'm sorry, Walter Payton, you don't even take 2. Not in 2022. But when Saquon Barkley is right, he can be the best player on the field against any given team. And you could argue that he was yesterday in that game against a guy that's like a fringe Hall of Famer in Derrick Henry. And he's clearly the more explosive running back. And I just think sometimes it's cool to watch a guy, and this is what makes sports the greatest reality show, right? We have the great players that are humming. We have the former great players that are kind of trending down or getting cut and budging teams. And then you have the great players that kind of get lost in no man's land because of injury, and a lot of them just disappear. And every once in a while, you get a guy to kind of resurrect his career. And the guy that I saw in Dayball kind of road, you went, if he can just get it back, I still don't think the Giants are a very good team. I'm not a big Daniel Jones guy, not a big Tua guy either. Both those quarterbacks won. Like, is winning and losing a quarterback stat? Obviously, if you have a good quarterback, you're going to win more often than you do. But I can watch a player whose team wins and goes, yeah, don't really see it. But when I watch Saquon Barkley, I think that guy's remarkable. Now, top-end speed is probably the last attribute you have to have as a running back. Like, you can be a great running back and not run a 4.3. You can run a 4.6 if you have instincts, elusive vision. You have the ability to break tackles. You're tough. You're smart. You can catch the ball. Saquon Barkley basically has everything you would want beside the pass blocking, which we've all seen the videos of him lifting. He's definitely strong enough to take on linebackers. It's just a want to. So I'm glad, if I'm a Giants fan, at least every time you enter the game, I'm not acting like you're winning 8-9 games because I do not believe you will. But if you could just win a couple more than you have the last couple seasons and be much more interesting because of number 26, that would be fun. That would be fun. And it was cool to watch Brian Daboll go for it. I think guys going for it, when your team sucks, when you have nothing to it's not like you're the Chiefs or the Bills or the Rams. Why would you not go for it? What do you have to lose? More games? To me, that was 100% the right pick or the right move. Glad it worked out because you should get rewarded when you have balls in society. And Dayball clearly did. And last but not least, before we kind of dive into some nuggets, the Chiefs. I said over and over again, well, one, just having the opportunity to work in a building for 2 years around Andy Reid, he's probably the most driven, maniacal competitor I've ever seen. Just in terms of his relentless competitive stamina to just grind on football. Now, obviously a lot, all great coaches have it. But the reason that really separates him is his knowledge of football, his ability to work with players, and just his grind mentality. The guy would grind if he was a 5-win coach or if he was winning 12 wins. It's not even about like he's trying to prove something, wins a Super Bowl. I remember talking to people with the Chiefs after they won the Super Bowl, and they're like, yeah, I drove by the office the other day. Coach Reid was there, like a Sunday. It wouldn't change, and it doesn't change. That Belichick's the same. All great competitors don't change whether they're winning or losing. It is though it's easier when you've lost to find motivation. It's easier to grind like when you get fired from your job. It's easier to go try to find some cash when you look in your bank account and you don't have any. You're like, I need to go lock up some deals. Well, I give you $10 million. Still going to work as hard? Some people will. Some people have that maniacal, competitive, just makes them nuts. And listen, when I say nuts, I mean that in a positive way. Like the nutty nature, like the majority of people like staying in the slow lane. The majority of people like it easy. The highest level of competitors in any industry, especially with ones that are public or with a ton of money on the line, are fucking crazy. And I say that in a good way. And I think one thing we're finding out about Andy's quarterback is he kind of has that too. And I said over and over and over this year, this guy's going to come back with a vengeance. And I had a buddy on the staff that said, this guy, he's got a focus in his eye. And if you watch them through the preseason, and we're lucky because Coach Reid puts these guys in the game in the preseason, you went, God, Mahomes looks pretty good. But it was easy to go, it could just be the preseason. And then you watch them go into the desert and play the Cardinals, who, let's face it, reeling a little bit, not a big believer, well-earned 6-point favorite, and absolutely eviscerate Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, think about the flip side. Kyler Murray's a guy who bitched and moaned he didn't have a contract, even though he still had multiple years left on his, had just had the most embarrassing playoff loss in like modern history for a really good player. I mean, we all have to agree, it couldn't have looked any worse. Mahomes, meanwhile, had the worst loss of his career at home in the AFC Championship game, where they were up 21-3, where he had thrown 3 touchdowns. Now, he had a terrible second half, but Kyler bitch and moan, hadn't got paid. They had to put the video game clause in there. Meanwhile, Mahomes, who's already been paid, has a terrible loss, comes back and looks like Tom Brady 2.0. Like, I'm on a mission to win this thing again. Now, is he going to? I don't know. But you watch Patrick Mahomes and you watch Andy in that game, good luck. And I've been thinking about this. The NFL is very lucky that Buffalo and Kansas City don't play in a dome. Because if they were like in Indy, they would eviscerate the league. The only thing that's going to neutralize those guys is the cold weather, and they both play in it. And when I say neutralize it, give yourself a chance. Because they are better than you. Andy's got the best quarterback in the league. Arguably, Rodgers, we'll see. He's the 2-time MVP. But you know what I mean. Who is on a mission. Josh Allen had the same look. On a mission. Meanwhile, Kyler's like, wonder when the new Call of Duty comes out. Anyone want a game tomorrow, Monday? If I'm Michael Bidwell, I'm thinking, and I said this over and over and over, how are you going to give contract extensions to your coach and GM? And then give a contract extension to your quarterback, who clearly I don't think you like all three. Maybe you like Steve Keim personally because you've known him for so long, but you can't think Kingsbury's that good, and you definitely got questions on the quarterback. Meanwhile, Clark Hunt's feet up and go, God, I got the most stable coach in the franchise, really since like Hank Schramm. You could say Marty, but come on, that was a roller coaster ride. And I got easily the best quarterback in the history of my franchise. R.I.P. Len Dawson. And we are rolling. And you look at the Cardinals, it was like a dichotomy, the opposite ends of the sphere of just an organization, high level with high level people. You could pay Andy and you could pay Mahomes $5 and you would get the same effort. Kyler Murray basically just told you, if you don't pay me, I'm going to quit. Wah, 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 wah. And what team beat the living piss out of the other? The team of the guys that aren't driven by money. The team of the guys that have more talent than the other team. The team of the guys that are dramatically more talented and just better. And think about this. It's why character and mindset, and we talk about it all the time, because it matters. It really, really matters. Let's dive into some nuggets around the league. Last I saw, TJ Watt, torn pec, looking around, see if he has to get he's going to like second and third opinion. Not ideal. I mean, that sucks. That is a massive, massive blow for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, he's one of the best players in the league. So if he's out for a considerable amount of time, if his season's derailed, I don't want to say they're screwed, but I'm not going to say I told you so, but come on, guys. You get 4 picks, whatever, from Burrow in the first half. Mitchell Trubisky, you guys should have won that game, and I was someone that bet on the Steelers. They should have been up by several touchdowns. Trubisky's just not good enough. He's just not good enough. Is Kenny Pickett, you know where I stand on Kenny Pickett, but just put him in the game. What are you doing with Trubisky? He stinks. Good backup. And when I say good backup, means you feel good about a guy with experience you don't ever want to play. Dennis Allen. I'm not a believer in Dennis Allen, and I don't know if much changed, but here's what I do know. He had to win that game. Under no circumstances could you, where the majority of the 22 starters in that game on both sides, what does the Saints have? Better starters at 18 to 19 of the positions? You had to win that game. And I wasn't watching it, but I looked up and it was 26-10, and I went, Dennis Allen is going to lose his first game being a head coach. It's like Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. When you get handed something that's running at a high level, you can't then take a step back with that thing. It has to keep going in a trajectory, at best, staying stable. And it felt like, God, clearly Notre Dame, they're an embarrassment right now. They just lost at home to Marshall. People are like, you're talking about him getting fired? Yeah, I am talking about Marcus Freeman getting fired. He was handed a program. Scott Frost was handed a shit sandwich. Now, it turns out Scott Frost doesn't know what he's doing. He can't fix a Power 5 program. Marcus Freeman was handed a program that averaged 10.8 wins the last 5 seasons. I'll round up. I'll say 11. And has been consistently a top 7-8 program in the country. A high-level operation with NFL guys all over the place. Their own TV deal. It doesn't get any better. And he lost to Marshall at home, a 20-point favorite. Like, that's one of the most embarrassing losses I think I've ever seen. Like, Nebraska losing to Georgia Southern. Like, yeah, Nebraska loses to a lot of people. Notre Dame over the last 5-6 years does not lose to a lot of people. And they definitely don't lose to Marshall at home. So, it's just Dennis Allen had to win that game. Just like Marcus Freeman had to win that game. Dennis Allen won it. Marcus Freeman didn't. Jalen Hurts watched some of the Eagles game today. And I actually am really coming around. Now, I would like him to throw the football better. But here would be my comp. He's like a poor man's Lamar Jackson. There are some basic throws that sometimes he misses that make you go, God, Jalen, that's such an easy throw. But then he does some spectacular stuff. And he is a very natural runner of the football. Like when he runs, he doesn't take that many big shots. And he is just natural in the open field. And his blend of running, him and A.J. Brown clearly have a rapport. I mean, they're buddies. They're on the same page. They're hitting big plays. The Eagles have a very talented team. Now, I know the Lions came back in the game. It was 38-21. Last year, the Niners played them week 1, and it was like 31-10, and the final score was like an 8-point win. So the Lions, under Dan Campbell, do not die easily. But I thought the Eagles, their offense was very, very impressive. Defense, they did have a pick 6, but you would like to not give up all those points late in the game. But I'll give you a little bit of a pass there. I think it's pretty clear from a talent standpoint, Eagles are clearly the most talented team in that division. I mentioned Justin Herbert earlier. He's a stud. He made some throws in that game against the Raiders. And this is the problem for Derek. And this back to Carr. Like, they need him to be good because I'm recording this part before the Monday night game. Just assume Russell kind of gets his swag back a little bit. Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. Justin Herbert, when he's playing like that, is the top 5 quarterback in the league. And depending on how Russell plays this year, could easily be a top 5 or 6 quarterback. That's who the Raiders are dealing with. So they need Derek, who's never going to be a top 4 or 5 player in the league, but to be like 8, 9, 10, not 11, 12, 13, 14, right? And that's where Justin Herbert's just throwing BB after BB after BB. God, I mean, that guy, if I'm a Charger fan, if I'm just a fan of football, him, Mahomes, Lamar, Josh Allen, there are some very entertaining talents right now in the league. Speaking of talents, Justin Jefferson, holy cannoli, as Klay Thompson would say. What a special player. To me, the coolest part about football, and just probably sports in general, but specifically football, is how fast you know, and then we always talk about, isn't it crazy that Justin Jefferson went 22nd? Isn't it crazy that A.J. Brown went in the second round? Isn't it crazy that Deebo Samuel went in the second round? Isn't it crazy that DK Metcalf? It happens all the time with wide receivers. You're telling me the Bengals got T. Higgins in the second round? You're telling me the 49ers got Brandon Ayuk at the end of the first round? It happens every single year, and we immediately know. And he's the highest high end of it because he's a star. He is a absolute matchup nightmare, playmaking Jesse. The Vikings are very, very lucky to have him, and their offense with him, holy jeez, it looks good. Big week coming up for Trey Lance. It's going to be a nice day in Levi Stadium, unlike the day in the monsoon. If I'm not giving the guy a pass, but he's going to need to make some plays Sunday. He's going to need to throw some touchdowns. He's going to need to be an explosive player. I'm not saying they're going to have a quick hook and go to Jimmy Garoppolo week 3 if it doesn't go well, but this is a must-win week for the 49ers. You can't open your season with losses against the Bears and the Seattle, and then your next 2 games are Denver and the Rams. Like that, you got to beat Seattle at home. And the defense will be fine, but the quarterback's got to make some plays. Got to be explosive down the field. And I saw enough to think that there is potential there. We just got to get it done. Hit Ayuk, hit Deebo. Shanahan had a play schemed up for him wide open, and he missed it. It's got to happen. I just don't see it with Tua. I just don't. I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm just telling you what I see. And I get some DMs like, Middlekauff, why do you hate Tua? I do not. I honestly kind of want to like him. I enjoyed watching him at Alabama. I watch his arm. It resembles more of a pea shooter than it does a bazooka. When the ball comes out of his hand, it just goes so slow. If he was a baseball pitcher, he's throwing like 87 miles an hour. Like, you have to admit, if you're a Dolphins fan, and I watched the Patriot-Dolphin game early Monday morning, NFL Plus, watching the condensed games, I mean, I can bang out 5 or 6 games pretty quickly. Go to the gym, watch a couple, come home at my desk, watch a couple in the background. It's just any person on Monday morning, if they're just banging off, unless they got 3 TVs, acting like they saw all the games, complete bullshit. It's impossible. And at my condo in the Bay, I have 2 TVs. You know, I'm fighting an uphill battle, adapting. I just rented an office, so we'll be ready to rock and roll here in Scottsdale, pulling up the operation very, very quickly. And I'll have multiple TVs. But, like, to me, too, they have talent. Waddle and obviously Tyreek is a star. And Mostert's a good player. They have talent on the offensive weaponry. I don't know, man. How tough the AFC is, I have a hard time seeing Tua win big games. The Pats suck. New England looks like a 5-win team to me. Now, because of Belichick, they'll probably somehow find a way to win like 7. But that was not an impressive win. I'm sorry. Because the final score should have been like 40-7. Somehow it was 20-7. Not a hater. Just do not see it. Thanks for watching 3 and Out. You can check out the podcast below in the description. And make sure you subscribe right now to the Volumes YouTube channel.